Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So today I am continuing this series of eminent Arab scientists. This is the second last part of this series. Then I will talk about eminent Persian scientists, and finally eminent Turk scientists of the golden age of Islam. So today's topic is Ibn al-Haytham. He was a mathematician, an astronomer, and a physicist, and he belonged to present day Iraq. And as you can see that he lived about 1200 years ago. So he is universally acknowledged as the father of modern optics. 1200 years ago, he described some things, so scientific methods, which are even now considered as valid, and so he's called the father of modern optics. And also the world's first true scientist. You know that science requires not only hypotheses or hypotheses, but you have to prove them by scientific methods. So he was the first person who adopted these techniques, and he propagated these techniques that these should be adopted. In the West, he is known as Alhazen. So he wrote a very uh, big book, Kitabul Manazir, and its original edition is not available, but its Latin translation is still available. And his work was so important that great modern scientists of the last 5 centuries, like Isaac Newton, Johannes Kepler, Christian Huygens, and Galilei, they cited his work and took guidance from his work. So let us look at his scientific achievements. So he, as already said, that he believed that the hypothesis must be supported by experiments based on conferable procedures. I mean, the procedures to use for experiments should be repeatable. I mean, you should get repeatable results from those procedures. That is an important thing, very important thing. And or mathematical reasoning. And if it is theoretical, then it should be proved by mathematics. So we can say that he described scientific method 5 centuries before Western scientists. So that is the reason that the world accepts him as the first true scientist. So he was the first person to correctly explain the theory of vision. I mean, he argued that light travels from objects to eye, rather than eye emitting light to see. So before him, everybody thought, even the great Greek philosophers also, I mean scientists, they thought that the eye emitted a light which fell on the objects, and then eye is able to see it. He was the first person who said, no, it is the light coming from the object to the eye, which is perceived by the eye, and we can see it. And he also showed by experiment that light travels in straight lines. This is called theorem of Ibn Haytham. And then he was also the first person who performed various experiments and made the concept of refraction and reflection clear. And he used different lenses and mirrors for this purpose. So his analysis of reflection and refraction So it's considering the vertical and horizontal components of light rays separately. So this is his description of the human eye. And you can see that it was, 1200 years ago, and his observation was very keen, and he has given minute details of the structure of the eye. So he was also the first physicist to give complete statement of the law of reflection. So he stated that the incident ray, the reflected ray, and the normal to the surface ray all lie in the same plane perpendicular to reflecting plane. And similarly, he studied the principle of least time for reflection. But unfortunately, the credit is given to French mathematician Pierre de Fermat, and it is known as Fermat's principle. So who knows, he may have got this idea from the work of Alhazen. So this is his Fermat's principle of least time, which should originally be dedicated to Alhazen. So Alhazen was also the first person to give the concept that the vision occurs in the brain. Now this is also very important. You can just imagine that 1200 years ago, he said that the image is not formed in the eye. It is the signals are sent to the brain and it is processed over there. Who could have thought about that in period? And he also said that the image formation is subjective, different from one person to another. And same thing, one person can see it differently from the other person. So here is what this figure describes what he meant. Then moving away from the optics, in astronomy, he described a new geometry-based planetary model, describing the motions of the planets in terms of spherical geometry, that is geometry of the surface of the spheres, then infinitesimal geometry, that is the uh, very small study of very small details of a bigger object, infinitely small details, not the whole, but its details. That is called infinitesimal geometry. And trigonometry, you all know that it is the geometry related to angles. The salient facts of his life. Ibn al-Haytham or Alhazen, he was born, as I said, in Basra, Iraq, and he may be from an Arab or Persian family, we don't know. And he had a title of a wazir in Basra. That is, he was a influential person. And he made a name for himself on his knowledge of applied mathematics. And he was a famous person in his own life. Then he moved to Cairo and wrote his influential book of optics. So his most important work is 7-volume book on optics, Kitab al-Munazir, that is the book of optics I just mentioned. And it took him about 10 years to write it. Then it was translated into Latin at the end of the 12th century or the beginning of the 13th century, and it was a very popular book in the Middle Ages throughout Europe and other parts of the world. Now, here are comments of a famous professor, modern professor, about Alhazen. So Professor Anne P. Howard wrote in 1996 that Alhazen should be credited with many discoveries and theories previously attributed to Western Europeans writing centuries later. I mean, this is a confession made by a European himself that many discoveries which are attributed to different Western scientists, as I just mentioned about Fermat, should actually be attributed to Alhazen. So he also gave the example of what what is known as Hering's law of equal innervation. That is the point in the space where both eyes sees an object correctly. You know that if you bring something very close to your eyes, then it blurs, and both eyes have a different view about it. So if you go further back, then there will be a point where both eyes can see it correctly. And similarly, he wrote a description of vertical horopters 600 years before Aguilonius, that is actually closer to the modern definition than Aguilonius. So, and then his work on binocular disparity was repeated by Penham in 1858. This binocular disparity is the means that on the retina, the image of an object on the retina of right eye is different from the image of that object on the retina of the left eye. But then it is processed by the brain and we see the correct image. So he described it about 1,000 years before Mr. Penham, who got the credit for that. So these are the references which are used for the preparation of this vlog. Next and last of the Arabic scientists, eminent Arabic scientists, will be Abbas ibn Firnas. So this is, as you know, the series Scientists of the Golden Age of Islam. And currently, I am talking about eminent Arab scientists. So these 8 prominent scientists I have already talked about in my vlogs. And 9th is this one, Alhazen. And 10th, as I mentioned, next one will be the last about eminent Arab scientists. And then I will start about eminent Persian scientists and finally eminent Turk scientists. Other series, my current series, Science and the Holy Quran, Famous Persons, the other side, Miscellaneous Topics, and completed series is Japan series. So if you are interested in any of these vlogs, you can just type Awaz Dost Dr. Abdul Haq in the search window and you will get my URL. And then when you click on it, you can access my vlogs. So my request is to subscribe if you have not subscribed till now and share it. These are my vlogs are purely educational. And I just, as I have done throughout my life, I just want to spread knowledge. So these are my email address, then the URL, web page, which is also very successful, and WhatsApp number. Oh, thank you very much for your attention. Allah Hafiz, till the next time. Take care of yourself.